German tank crews in Normandy lived by a simple rule. A Sherman was a target, not a threat. A Tiger gunner could sit 1,000 meters away and destroy Shermans one after another, while the shells coming back cracked against his frontal armor and bounced into the sky. For the 5 men inside each Sherman, that rule was a nightmare they climbed into every single morning. For the Germans, it was routine. Then, in the summer of 1944, the rule broke. Shells stopped bouncing. They started punching straight through armor that no Allied tank gun was supposed to beat. Because hidden among the ordinary Shermans was one that was not ordinary at all. And German gunners learned to search for it before anything else. A Sherman with a barrel that looked far too long. One tank flipped the fear in Normandy, and this is how it happened. The story ends on an August morning in 1944, when a gunner who had never fired a shot in combat lined up that long barrel on the most famous tank ace of the entire war. That moment is coming. First, understand what tank combat looked like from the Allied side in June 1944. The standard Sherman carried a 75mm gun. Against the side of a German Tiger, it could do real damage at close range. Against the Tiger's front, 100mm of solid steel, it was nearly useless at any realistic fighting distance. The Panther was even worse. Its thick, sloped front plate shed those shells the way a steep roof sheds rain. Meanwhile, the Tiger's 88mm gun could destroy a Sherman from more than 1.5 kilometers away. At that range, most Sherman gunners could barely land a hit at all, and even a direct hit would not have mattered. The crews knew all of this. They scanned every hedgerow, every tree line, every shadow, because the first sign of a Tiger was often the shot that killed you. Veterans later traded grim nicknames for the Sherman, Tommy Cooker among them. Historians still argue about where those names really came from and how much the legend grew in the telling. Nobody argues about the fear underneath them. 5 men, sealed inside thin steel, facing guns they could not answer. Britain saw this problem coming long before D-Day. It already owned a gun that could kill a Tiger from the front. It just had no tank that could carry it. The solution came from a workshop on the English coast, a handful of stubborn officers, and a gun that did not fit. That gun was the 17-pounder, Britain's most powerful anti-tank weapon, nearly 3 tons of steel with a barrel over 4 meters long. In its towed form, it was already knocking out German heavy tanks, but the British tank designed to carry it into battle was stuck in development and running badly late. Normandy would not wait. So in 1943, at the Lulworth Gunnery Ranges, a major named George Brighty tried something the experts had written off as impossible. He forced a 17-pounder into the turret of an ordinary Sherman. It did not fit, not even close. When a gun that size fires, it slams backward, and the Sherman's turret simply had no room for that recoil. Officials told Brighty to stop. He kept going, and he found an ally in George Witheridge, a lieutenant colonel who had been blown out of his own tank in North Africa. Witheridge carried the scars of fighting German armor with guns that could not hurt it. For him, this was not an engineering exercise. It was personal. The breakthrough came from a Vickers engineer named W.G.K. Kilbourne. He redesigned the recoil system so the gun traveled a much shorter distance when it fired. Then the team turned the gun on its side so the loader could feed shells in from the left instead of from above. They cut a hole in the back of the turret and bolted on an armored box just to hold the radio because there was no space left inside. They deleted the Hull machine gunner's position entirely. His seat became storage for the huge new shells, each one nearly the length of a man's arm, and the loader got his own escape hatch cut into the turret roof because climbing out past that enormous breach in a burning tank was close to impossible. The result was cramped, improvised, and ugly. The British were so desperate for it that they ordered around 2,100 before final testing had even finished. To put that number in perspective, by the end of the war, Britain converted more Fireflies than Germany ever managed to build Tiger tanks. They called it the Sherman Firefly. On paper, it looked like a compromise. Downrange, it looked like something else entirely. Start with the numbers, because the numbers explain the fear. With its standard armor-piercing rounds, the 17-pounder could punch through roughly 140 to 160 millimeters of armor at 500 meters. The Tiger's frontal plate was 100. For the first time in the war, a Sherman could kill Germany's heavy tanks head-on, at ranges where Tiger crews had always felt untouchable. Britain's new Sabot ammunition promised even more, over 250 millimeters of penetration on paper, though the early rounds flew so unpredictably at range that most crews trusted the standard shell instead. Now the honest part. The Firefly was not a wonder weapon, and its own crews knew it best. The muzzle blast was horrific, a flash and a wall of dust so violent that the gunner was often blinded for seconds, and every German for kilometers knew exactly where the shot came from. Experienced crews learned to fire and then move immediately, because staying put after that giant flash was an invitation. Wrestling those massive shells inside a cramped turret made the rate of fire slower than a normal Sherman's. Its high explosive round was weak against infantry and anti-tank guns, and underneath everything, it still wore ordinary Sherman armor. Every German gun that could kill a regular Sherman could kill a Firefly just as easily, so the British fought it as a team weapon. One Firefly joined every troop of 4 tanks. The 3 regular Shermans drew attention, laid smoke, and worked the flanks, while the Firefly hung back and took the killing shot, one long barrel guarding 3 ordinary ones. It was a strange kind of responsibility. The troop's survival against heavy armor rested on a single gun, a single gunner, and the few seconds it took to reload. The Germans noticed fast. No verified order has survived that formally commanded crews to destroy Fireflies first. But veteran accounts from both sides describe the same terrifying habit. German gunners learned to study the Shermans in their sights and pick out the longer barrel before firing at anything else. Knocking out the Firefly first meant the rest of the troop was helpless again. For a Firefly crew, that knowledge sat with them in the turret. Of all the tanks on the battlefield, theirs was the one the enemy wanted dead first. The British answer was paint. Crews countershaded the barrel, painting the underside of its front half white or pale, so that at a distance, the famous long gun looked like a stubby 75. It is one of the strangest images of the war. A tank disguising its greatest weapon, just to live long enough to use it. By August 1944, the Firefly had rewritten the rules of engagement in Normandy, and on the morning of August 8th, near a village south of Caen, the new rule met the old legend. Michael Wittmann was the most celebrated tank commander of the war. On June 13, 1944, at Villers-Bocage, his lone Tiger had torn through a British column and destroyed more than a dozen tanks and vehicles in around 15 minutes. German propaganda made him a national hero, credited with over 130 kills. To Allied tank crews in Normandy, his name meant everything they feared about the Tiger, compressed into one man. Villers-Bocage haunted them for the rest of the campaign. Rumors placed him everywhere. Every Tiger spotted in the hedgerows became, in whispered briefings, possibly Wittmann's. On August 8th, during the Allied offensive known as Operation Totalize, Wittmann led a group of Tigers north across open fields near Sintho to blunt the attack. Flat, open ground, Tiger country, where the 88 could kill long before any Sherman could answer. The old rule, one more time, but Wittmann did not know what waited on his flank. Concealed in an orchard near the village of Saint-Aignan-de-Cramonil sat the Shermans of the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry, Fireflies among them. In the gunner's seat of one sat Trooper Joe Ekins, 21 years old, a shoe factory worker from Northamptonshire. He had never fired a shot in combat. In his entire training, he had fired exactly 5 practice rounds. The morning was tense and quiet. The British crews had been warned that German armor was coming, and the gunners watched the open fields through their sights, barely breathing, waiting for the order to fire. Then the Tigers rolled past the orchard at around 800 meters, side on, unaware. Ekins squeezed the trigger. The rearmost Tiger burst into flames. He shifted to the next one and fired again. German return fire slammed into his turret and wounded his commander. And still the shooting continued. In the space of about 12 minutes, the shy young gunner with 5 practice rounds behind him had destroyed 3 Tiger tanks. One of them was Wittmann's. A 17-pounder shell touched off the ammunition inside, and the explosion ripped the entire turret off the hull and threw it into the field. The men of the yeomanry did not know whom they had just killed. To them, it was simply one more Tiger, the 3rd in 12 minutes, burning in a Norman field. One honest caveat belongs here. Canadian Fireflies of the Sherbrooke Fusiliers were engaging the same Tigers from about 1,100 meters, and some historians argue one of their gunners fired the fatal shot. The debate has never fully closed, but the most detailed investigations point to Ekins, and one fact stands beyond dispute. Michael Wittmann was killed by a Sherman Firefly, the one Sherman his own side had learned to shoot first. That morning, nobody spotted the long barrel in time. The most feared tank ace of the war was gone, and the myth of the untouchable Tiger died in that field with him. Joe Ekins remarkably never fired a tank's gun in combat again. He was reassigned as a co-driver soon afterward, and served out the war in quiet anonymity. Then he went home to Northamptonshire and walked back into the shoe factory he had left as a teenager. He worked his way up. He became a manager. For almost 40 years, he had no idea who had been inside that tiger. Researchers only pieced it together in the 1980s. He never called himself a hero. He made shoes. When historians and journalists finally tracked him down, the man who had brought down the war's deadliest tank ace seemed almost embarrassed by the attention. He had spent a single afternoon of his life as a tank gunner in combat. It was enough. So why did German tank crews fear this Sherman? Because it was the first one that could kill them before they killed it. A Sherman used to be a target, not a threat. The Firefly made every Sherman a question that no German gunner could afford to get wrong, and the ones who guessed wrong never got a second look at that long barrel.